Welcome to the Equipping Leaders Podcast Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, thus a leadership enthusiast.
We are doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, leadership decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show to look at how leadership is all around us. And even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and in the opportunities around us.
Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes. In this episode, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 2, A New Mission. Let's jump in.
So now we're in Episode 2 of Season 3, which is A New Mission. And so we had our flashback mission in the last one, and now we're back where Murphy was on that CDC submarine. And now we have the team who has no mission and is just kind of wandering about together of Warren, Doc, Addie, and Hector. And so, there's things happen immediately in this episode. And I think there's a lot of really interesting cultural differences about how people view things throughout this episode. So what stood out to you?
Favorite part. Okay, so they are they get incapacitated by this like external military force, and then they are they kind of wake up. They're handcuffed or whatever, and they're having this discussion and looking at things, and Warren kind of makes eyes at everyone to be like, sort of like, on three, we're gonna jump them, right? We're gonna take it, right? So she kind of does the now thing, and the camera's on her. She runs around. She does some crazy cool combat stuff. She's got her guy. She looks around. Nobody else has subdued their person, and she's kind of like makes like this like I thought you guys had this face. It's one of my favorite scenes in this whole thing, because then you have this other person hasn't introduced herself yet, but you can tell she's sort of like in charge, and she's just sort of like deadpan staring like, are we done now? Can we move on? And it's my favorite scene.
Yes. And because Warren makes the comment, I thought that was going to go a different way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but I did love that, because it goes to their team that's in the performing stage, even though just a short while ago, in reference to this scene, they were not really going to be a team anymore because their mission was over. They still had those dynamics with each other, that there's that unspoken, here's how we perform, right? Here's this next thing. So yeah, I thought it was both a cool scene and a very funny one.
Yeah, no, well, again, you right, that faith in the team, it didn't pan out. Nobody's bitter, right? Like, it's just it wasn't right. They weren't ready. There wasn't a lot of communication. And I just thought that was like, I have those days, right? Because sometimes, working with my own teams, you get those times where like somebody's like an external party, or maybe it's like a more senior leader comes and observes a meeting or something, and everybody's just maybe like, I know it's not the right answer, but just follow me down the path, right? Like, you're hoping to sugarcoat it, like everything's going great, sunshine and roses, and like they're like, oh, actually this thing's never gonna get done in time. And it's like, just kind of like look at them like, just shut up, we'll talk about it later. Like, I could so totally sympathize in that instance with Warren, because it's one of those just like, come on, you're better than this.
Yeah. And it's sad that the others didn't try. That's what was also funny, is you see them like mid, like, it's not working. This isn't going well. So yeah.
It's like, remember all that stuff I praised you about? Stop doing it right now, right? Like,
so we also see that Murphy is stepping into this odd, I wrote down an odd type of authority. And
did that like Captain's Hat give that away, or I said, did the captain's hat that he started wearing now give that away or what? Because I was also like very dictatorial kind of look, but we'll gloss over that one.
We definitely should not gloss over that one. Yes. Yeah, so how has he gotten authority? So they were on the CDC submarine. He finds out that this is not a cure for everyone. Maybe it will be eventually, but that ultimately it was for a bunch of billionaires who live on Zona. And so when he finds that out, that's not what he's not interested in that. So how does someone who has no authority or power take it? By force. So what does he do? He bites everybody, right? He bites everybody, and then they escape the submarine, which sinks. And so, yeah, so as he's stepping into this authority, he knows from his experience with Cassandra, and even with his experience with the 3 people at that pharmaceutical lab, he has this control, and he's finding it out in more and more ways. But then it's like, he's already done what everybody else has wanted him to do, right? Getting him to this lab, coming across the United States. And then when 10K asks him, where are we going? Murphy says to start a new world. And so what I think is so interesting is that it's like, that is a lofty thing. You're like, okay, maybe that's somebody that would be interesting to follow. But looking at his track record, not so much. And also, how is he doing that with these forced laborers, right? With these people who are forced to be there, and he has put them in a position where they cannot argue with him. So it's just interesting. That's why I don't want to call it leadership, but I want to call it authority. You know, and you're right, he does take the captain's hat, and it's just very, that arrogance once again that comes in because, oh, now I can make the rules in this game and I set the structure.
Yeah, the other thing too is like 10K is kind of like, I'm not going to go with you, right? And then he ends up just getting on the Jeep anyway. And I think throughout those little interactions that you see Murphy having with 10K, 10K doesn't. He's just doing things that normally aren't what he would do. And he's a little confused as to why he's like listening to Murphy. And I think that's pretty interesting as well.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, the way we go along with things.
Yeah. No.
And that's actually, so that's also really interesting because like when you just said it right now, it also reminded me of sometimes we're not sure about something. And so we're not necessarily consenting to it, but we're not arguing against it either. And so it does put us in a weird place, which is of course the place that 10K was, where it's like, I'm not into this. I don't know what an alternative is right now, right? So it's like, well, maybe I'll just kind of go along. And maybe like kind of to a point we were talking about in a previous episode where maybe that's why people are at jobs that they hate or don't like or are super unhappy at, because they're like, I don't know how to think in a different way than this, or I don't know how to find something better. So like, it's better than nothing type of thing.
Yeah, I also, right. So Murphy says he's going to go off and start a new world. And then they run into like, it looks like a bunch of zombies coming at them. And Murphy can't control them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, because I forget what I don't know if they've been named yet or not. Do you know?
The Enders.
Yeah, the Enders. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So he runs into these Enders, and like now there's this, again, he thought he had control over all of this, right? That dictator thing. And there's still something that the universe is sort of throwing at him that he has no control over. And I think that's like really interesting, because before that would sort of shake him. And this time it was like, it is, whatever, it is what it is. I have all these other things I control, and just like wipe this out. So it's like, he doesn't even give it the same passing thought anymore. And that's weird to me.
Well, because he has this other, like this dictatorial control. So
Yeah.
he can put something between him and that other thing that doesn't impact him. Because ultimately, even though I am a Murphy sympathizer, he is a coward, right? He's a coward. He's not a great person. So he has these moments of humanity, but he has moments of humanity, and the rest of the time he does not. So
yeah. So yeah, so you have that, and then now you also have on like the Warren, Doc, Addie sort of side with this new force that's kind of come into play, military, right? Like clearly military structure. Also, like a foreign military, right? So this is not like the U.S. Army. So Warren's kind of like, I feel like she's drifted away from that whole like military structure. I'm a lieutenant, you know, in the army kind of thing. She pulls it out when it's holds weight or merit with the people she's interacting with, but like it doesn't in this instance at all,
Mhm.
right? Like even though you would say like, oh well, military, it's different military, right? So I think that's also interesting because, um, you know, Sun May's character, who's kind of like her counter in this other little group, um, is uh like calling the shots a little bit, and is being like you have two really strong personalities kind of coming up against each other, and
Mhm.
one is trying to force someone to do something that they don't want to do. And I just think that that's a really interesting interaction because I've seen that a lot where you have two really great leaders that now are working towards the same thing, and that they've got to do their own little dynamic understanding of where are limits and who's doing what. And so um Warren's kind of not given up, but like we said, she doesn't have Murphy anymore. She doesn't have that mission anymore. So she's a little bit more like flippant with her comments. And I think that's really interesting because that's also kind of that bad attitude that you don't want to see enter into the workplace.
Interesting. I did not view it that way at all.
You know, I give up. I don't even know what we're doing here anymore.
That's why we're doing this together, two different perspectives. Yeah, because I definitely viewed it from, yeah, when they met Sun May and that group. I guess I didn't really view her comments as like flippant or anything, but just as like what is, like, we're being taken prisoner right now, right? We're being like, and so, and she even made the comment, I don't like being someone else's prisoner for this long. And so, yeah, so I think there's also that piece of, you're right, that she didn't bring up like, oh, here's who I am in the military, because it wouldn't have held weight with that group. But then they get into a place where they convince Sun May and her team to take off the how they were being bound, and so then they could actually help them fight zombies or enders and all the different things that were coming at them. That's where I thought that it got interesting also in a new way, where all of a sudden Sun May on her side, she started to lose some teammates, and we saw her character devolve and devolve quickly, I thought. And she brought up many things that I think they can be cultural, but they could also be like how someone is raised, right? Because so background, experience, whatever. But it was just really interesting to see this, like, oh, I lost these teammates. I failed. I'm a failure. This is a failure. I failed my country. It's just like a lot of like that type of self-talk that it's you and I have talked about in the past before. Sometimes our self-talk is just incredibly aggressive. And so to really hear that out loud, it's, you kind of think like, yeah, like this thing failed. That is a snapshot in time. Your glasses came off. You're about to say some stuff. I'm ready, Corey. Go.
Oh no, I agree, but you know, the other thing too is, uh, so yeah, aggressive self-talk all the way. That's my department. But the team earlier on too, right? I don't know. I know what you said, and I agree with everything you said. However, I disagree with all of it. But like the thing is, I think Warren set a bad precedent for the team too, because like earlier on when they were first on the beach, like right after they were kidnapped, and Warren tried to do that whole like take back, like gain of the team's freedom, the team fell through. Sun May, like when they were going after something, she like touched her on the shoulder, and she was like, "Oh, we're gonna have words," or she said something, right? But then when the team, the Sun May's team of folks, when they are like killing the zombies and everything, you have really it's just like Doc and Addie are like critiquing the team, right? So they're like assessing, take a very negative approach. I realize that their hands are cuffed by the Sun May's team. Sun May's team is still protecting them, right? So it's like, but they're like, oh, using a lot of bullets, you know, never heard of a kill
Mhm.
shot, and you know, oh, they've got silencers and everything else. So it's like they've taken this, and to me, that's dangerous because you're handcuffed, and these people, it's a military force that has weapons, and like I feel like a more collaborative approach would be the safer, better approach than like the hostile approach. And that's the thing, I feel like Warren set that precedent early on of not being negotiable or communicative. Made that word up, I think. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. But it's like, I don't know. I think Warren could have done a better job of setting a precedent, right? There was no room for negotiation there.
Interesting. Because I disagree. No, I'm just kidding. No, I definitely see that perspective. I think also maybe I just viewed it as she didn't have a reason to leave the team as she had before. So just meeting hostility with hostility, right? So like, instead of like, they go low, we go high, it's like they go low, we go toe to toe, like type of thing. Because they weren't willing to collaborate. They didn't speak the same language.
That's a fair point. I've also never been called an idiot in so many words before, but fair point.
I don't think that at all. Okay. But yeah, so then, yeah, as we see Sunmay start to lose these team members, and we see this cultural version of failure, then I think we see Warren step back up, right? So she's realizing who Sunmay is, what Sunmay is trying to do. Sunmay is trying to find a cure. And that submarine just went down, and she doesn't know that much about it. So she knows that that's no longer a viable option for getting this vaccination, but Sunmay is. And so she says, nothing you can do about it now. Keep your head in it, right? So like that was like when Sunmay first started to lose team members. And then it kind of like continues on. And Warren says several things kind of over the course of this that I thought were great. Because then it's like now all of Sunmay's team has been unalived by, these outside forces. And Warren says, get up, you're part of my mission now. And so I think there were these like little things where she just all of a sudden was like looking for that next rope to grab, to be like, yep, this is the next thing. And I think then like kind of one of the next things she said that Warren says is, this mission belongs to us. And so I just thought that, like, you're right, like there was a little bit of she was not in a leadership headspace. But then when she saw Sunmay start to really devolve as a leader, you can't help but be like, I can step in and I can fix this. Many leaders are problem solvers in that way, where they're like, we got this. But then when she realized that Sunmay was really alone, because Sunmay said so, that they got like, the signal that their country wasn't going to, like that, the mission was lost and they weren't going to be sending any additional resources or reinforcements. And I think that's when Warren, also understanding what Sunmay did, was like, we got this. Let's come together.
Yeah, good point. You could have also just stopped after you said I was right. I would have accepted that answer as well. No, I'm kidding. No, that's a really good point. I think the problem solving piece for Warren, I think that's true too. Is like, it's, sometimes I think leaders, I think can get a little like lost if they don't have that problem to solve. And so I also think I've also seen that be, it's a very powerful instinct to have, I think, like a good one, especially within an organization. I also think it'd be damaging if it's not like well guided, because I've also seen a lot of leaders look for problems that aren't there to solve problems that aren't there. And obviously not the case with Warren, but you saying that kind of made me think that in my head of like, sometimes people will try to look for an issue just to solve it. And it just always makes me don't look for drama where there's no drama. You know what I mean? Don't make it just because you can't find it type thing. So
Yeah.
that's a really good point too.
Well, and I really like the point you just made about, overlooking for a problem will create one. And it's not the one that you think you're solving for. And so a lot of times I hear people say that where they're like, what problem does this solve? What problem does it have to solve a problem? Maybe there's a gap there. It's going to create a problem later or whatever. Or maybe there's another, like, maybe it's also there, like, because, oh, this is a development thing, or this is this other thing. It doesn't have to, like, every single thing in this world doesn't have to solve a problem. And it kind of goes into that whole thing of like, I know they teach that a lot in different like entrepreneurial classes and stuff like that, where like you have to tell, you have to be solving a problem or tell people what problem it solves. Sure, that is many things, but that is not everything. And so, yeah, when people are just so focused on that, I see that a lot because people be like, was there a needs assessment? Did this thing happen? And it's like, the assessment for it is that there is no data. That's the assessment, is that this is something that should be measured and it's not, right? So maybe that is a problem, but also it's like, maybe we need to build this thing because people have asked for it and not because there's a problem per se.
Yeah, oh God, you just made me shudder thinking about some stuff at work. But yeah, that's yeah, oh boy, I feel seen. Put it that way. Yeah, so I think it's cool. I think the only other thing kind of, because I think then we revisit with Citizen Z a little later on. But before we get there, one of the other things I thought was kind of cool when you're talking about like showing respect and like different when the team is so like when Warren, Addie, Doc, all them, when they're all getting led through and the zombies are coming at them, and then Hector kind of like shoulder checks one of the zombies that's coming after or coming near Sun May, and Warren mercies it, like bare hand, right? Real like kind of like that's how we do it, you know what I mean, here. And I think that might be the exact quote, but like I thought that was cool because they felt like underappreciated or undervalued. And she's like, now we proved our worth. Now imagine what we could do if we actually had our like weapons. And when they go to give the weapons, they talk about, hey, we've been observing you guys for a while. And like Addie, who I think has like the most like hero weapon, right, as far as consistency, her type of baseball bat thing, like we saw how effective it was, and we made some additional modifications, right, which was like the electricity in it and then like the flashlight in the handle. And I thought that was a really cool thing because it let the Operation Bite Mark folks know, like I don't know, like a confidence, right? Like it was a great compliment that this other group that has way more resources, right? Airdrops and silencers and weird laser spiky mercy grenade things, like was still watching the way this team worked and like appreciated that. And I think that little bit of compliment there is like such a huge, like then after that they were kind of a little bit more chill, right? Everybody's walking together, they're working effectively, they were sharing more information, right? Sun May was talking about what they had done to try to find the cure. Warren was talking about what she did, right? Like really volunteering information, because there was just that immediate trust that was built just by simply acknowledging and not being so confrontational of like, I'm better than you, and trying to throw weight around about who's the bigger leader. They just said, we both have strengths and weaknesses, and we've tried to adapt to some of your strengths. And I thought that was more what I expected Warren to do. That's the Warren that I know and love.
Yeah. Well, that's such a great point, that it was like there were these little things, or even sometimes big things on both sides, with Hector shoulder checking, or like with them still being like, I mean, they didn't want to be taken out by zombies, but also if in the process of that, by virtue of like that going on, they were able to also help other people, they were willing to do that. So there was like just this shift, you're right, in that like time when, oh, okay, so we have these new weapons for you. Oh, like you essentially saved us or supported us when we were fighting these zombies. So yeah, it's, and I think that's the other thing is, some people will say like, oh, you have to earn trust, which I think is insane. Like, I just inherently trust people, and, and then if that trust breaks, we're going to have a conversation about it. But I'm not like, you have to earn my trust, and if it's broken, you're never getting it back. Like, who am I? But I think also that's like, just so like people are humans and they make mistakes. So like going at it like that and is not helpful to anyone. But, you know, you don't want to be walked all over, but at the same time, people show up in different ways for different reasons. So I know I've said this several times over the last few episodes, but like, how are you meeting the moment? And how are you actually like showing up in that way, like as you want to as a leader, but then also allowing other people to show up how they want to as a leader or a team member or whatever. And so there are those little things that we're always doing that are building this relationship. It doesn't have to be this big, like, I saved your life and the life of 20 children when the school bus went off the edge. You know, it doesn't have to be like this huge thing. It can be these little moments.
Yeah, I that, and like you said, and then after that, obviously, I know I jumped backwards to jump forwards, where we had already talked about Sunmay starting to like lose some folks on her team, and like that like real internalization of like all is lost. And then I think it's really cool though, like you had said, where um uh right, some of her teammates turned in disease, and you know she, you know, like did that mercying process, and that's something that we know Warren and most everyone on the team has had to have done. And it's also, it's not like a super unique experience in the zombie apocalypse, right? It doesn't, just because everyone has done it or has had to do it, doesn't make it any less difficult for the person that's got to do it again. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And again,
yes.
that I think has so many um like you talk about that a lot for a lot of different job things too. And I just, that, then you follow up with like the airdrop that they were trying to go towards, that having been already taken away. Like there's so much like failure that's coming in that one. And you know, Warren and everybody tries to like, hey, it looks like they went this way, we'll still go get it. Like they try to stay positive. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff that you just said in there.
So much good stuff for you to disagree with.
Shockingly, in a surprising turn of events, I don't disagree with anything you just said. Just made me very reflective, I think. Yeah. I think it was also interesting too when Sunmay asked what mercy meant, right? Like why they called it that. And when Warren was explaining that it was like respecting that the person still had humanity at some point. Because I think that after the previous real like episode that was in the regular timeline, we did see Warren disengage. And now to see her, like, it's almost like these little things are happening that are reminding her, A, who she is, which is a leader. And then two, these little questions and stuff where it's like, this is what, like, this is why that's important. And I think that as leaders, as professionals in general, we need those reminders for ourselves consistently along the way, just to re-anchor ourselves in what it is that we're doing and why it's so valuable. And do we do this thing? And it also gives us the opportunity to assess, why are we doing this thing? Am I doing this because someone else told me to, and it's this relic from, you know, a previous generation that no longer applies in the workplace now, or could we do it better? And so, yeah, so I really liked that too, where it was like all these just little reminders in this communicating with someone from a different culture that really came up.
Yeah, I wrote down real quick. That's, you know, the reminders too is like, so Warren was a leader and was caring for people and mercy and like, let's get through this zombie apocalypse before she met Murphy, right? When they were at that original village, when you know, Sergeant Hammond and Murphy came, I think it was a rowboat, whatever it was, right? Came up in the boat. She's a leader then. Before the zombie apocalypse, right? In the military, she was leading people at work. Her husband, right? We knew was like a firefighter. So again, stretching some story there, but you can assume there was some level of volunteerism or leadership within the community, tends just to be associated with that role. You know what I mean? So it's like, that is at the core who she is. And yeah, she kind of lost herself there in the moment, because I think it was also just like, not shock, but that was a big, she literally walked across the country, right? Can't stress that enough. So it's like, that's like yeah, it's kind of this big brain reset, and now she's just sort of coming back online again, remembering why she's in California, why she got there, and all the things that led up to that. So yeah, that's a good point too. I didn't really think about that.
I think you bring up another good point, so many good points that sometimes I have a lot of friends who, when they retire from the military, maybe they've been in 20 years, maybe they've been in 30 plus years.
Gross.
And the ones who try to jump right back into some other job, they do fine, of course, but the ones who do the best acknowledge this giant reset like you're talking about. Like, I just did this other thing for this long. I don't want to do more of that, or maybe I do, but let me actually figure out what that means. And maybe I won't be a leader. I won't do these other things for a while until I figure that out. And when people do that, the handful or so that I've seen do that, they actually land better to be like, oh no, it's like, it's not like they got out of the military and they were so scared about having another job that they just grabbed the first one that came along. And now they're doing essentially what they were doing in the military. Maybe that's why they left. Maybe they liked it. Pardon me. But it's like, yeah, like the mission has changed. Your mission has changed. Your entire career has changed. Let's just take a minute and acknowledge that.
Yeah, that reason, and I think that's also that's a very good point for that reset. And I think that's where I start. Also, not gross to the military. I support the troops. Gross to doing. I haven't even lived for 30 plus years yet, right? But well, I'm in 30 plus, so it's just like that's a long time to do anything. And I think that's also where my brain struggles with that. I can understand needing that. You raise like a really great point of like respecting that. Take a moment to like reassess what you're gonna do. I don't normally do. I get like kind of bored quickly. So I'm always doing not a reset. I'm just moving on to the next new thing, right? Not at the cost of people or relationships, but it's like I I am not somebody that looks for stability, like from a like I want to do the same thing every day for 30 plus years. That's not what I want. I want something new. I always kind of want to be uncomfortable and not knowing, because like that almost fear is where I that's like the exhilaration of getting out of bed, right? Because God knows I'm not jumping out of the back of a plane anytime soon or anything like that. Um, not athletic, but yeah. So that that reset piece for Warren, and then I also think like she's helping. She's going through it maybe two steps before Sun May's going through it, and is able to now mentor and coach Sun May as another leader because her mission just died, right? So it's like I think that's a really cool relationship and bond. And it's a really cool perk, I think, of being a leader is getting to help somebody else through something that you have just gone, maybe just gone through yourself, right? So it's not that you're an expert, you're just sharing your experience. And I think that's like the most enjoyable part of leadership.
And when Warren tells her you're part of my mission now, it's also that signal of you're not alone and we're in this together, right?
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes what people need when they are going through that kind of a struggle. So,
Yeah, so and now Sunday is part of that mission. So I think it's also really cool that Warren has established like sort of like um everyone is not a like Warren's still going to lead that group, right? But Sunmay is like a part of it, and like her opinions are valid, and what like that sort of stuff. Like I think that's really cool. Is that it wasn't like you're our prisoner now, right? Like, haha, the roles have reversed. It was no, we're you're an equal to this team, right? The way it works, and I also think that Sunmay somewhat subconsciously is like I'm in a new place, right? Like this whole concept of mercy that they do, um, all that stuff. Like I'm a stranger in a strange environment now. I'm trusting in you. I'm gonna default to like what you think is best, and I'm gonna add in my 2 cents where I think I can also contribute. So I think like again, effective leader jumping into effective follower, like that's that whole transition, like you were talking about a few episodes ago, of like you know um, that level of impact that she can have.
Yeah, that step up, step back, like whatever the moment meets. And I think it also speaks to Warren where she's not that dictatorial leader. She's like, no, we're a team, we're all contributing here. She is the de facto leader, but she's not like, it's kind of like that old saying where they're like, a lion doesn't need to tell you it's a lion because it's a lion. And so I feel like that's very much Warren, where she doesn't need to say she's the leader, she's the leader. And she does that by bringing people together, but letting them stand on their own and have their own voice and their own role. And she's not like, oh, Sun May's here and she makes cures. I make cures. She doesn't. That's not her lane. And so she really is good at using the genius of the group and being the genius emphasizer and doesn't need to be the genius herself.
And in stark contrast, ya boy, Murphy, we find out at the end of this episode, because 10K was sort of going along with Murphy, and we find out that he's got a giant old bite mark on the back of his neck. And I think where Warren tends to be, she takes other people's like goals, emotions, everything into consideration, right? And if she's going to do something counter to that, if time permits, because we are in a zombie apocalypse, she does explain why, right? She gives the like, I know this isn't what you want to do, but this is, she doesn't ask for the buy-in. She says this is what we have to do, but she does give the explanation. She gives, right? She like explains that so that they at least not, even if they don't understand, she shared it with them for them to understand later, right?
Right. They don't have to like it, but they just, give them the information.
Murphy knew it was very clear, right? 10K's biggest fear was becoming what Murphy turned Cassandra into.
Yeah.
And he did it anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like, but oh, Murphy, great guy, mistreated. So we'll just give him the pass, I guess. But yeah. So
excuse me, could you please play the tapes? I never said great guy. I said mistreated. Okay. No, I think that's a really great call out there too, because again, how do you get total control of someone else? You play into their worst fears. That's not a team at all, right? That is a dictatorship. That's a total institution. It's not leadership at all. So yeah,
but
we'll see how that emerges over the next few episodes.
Yes, ma'am.